The hand under the bed. I moved into a cheap, old apartment a few months ago. It wasn't much, but it was perfect for someone living alone. The first night there, I noticed a faint scratching sound coming from under my bed. I assumed it was mice and figured I'd deal with it later. But the scratching didn't stop. It got louder every night. Eventually, I started hearing something move, the creak of the bed frame shifting, as if something heavy was crawling beneath it. One night, after weeks of this, I finally decided to check it out. I grabbed a flashlight, got down on my hands and knees, and looked under the bed. Nothing. Just an empty, dusty floor. Relieved, I went back to sleep. But the next night was different. I woke up at 3 a.m. with the eerie feeling that I wasn't alone. I stayed perfectly still, listening. That's when I heard it, breathing. Slow, heavy breathing, coming from directly below me. Before I could react, I felt it. A cold, firm hand grabbed mine from under the bed. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I tried to pull my hand away, but the grip tightened. And then I heard it. A whisper, low and raspy, said, "Where have you been?" I tore my hand free, bolted out of bed, grabbed my keys, and ran out of the apartment. I never went back. A few weeks later, I came across a local news article. The apartment I had rented once belonged to a man who disappeared years ago. His body was never found, but neighbors reported strange noises, scratching, breathing, and whispers, coming from his bedroom long after he vanished. To this day, I wonder who, or what, was under that bed. The Whispering Closet. I've never been superstitious, but something about my childhood home always felt off. My room was at the end of a long hallway, and across from my bed was an old wooden closet. It wasn't anything fancy, just one of those creaky, warped closets that smelled faintly of mothballs and dust. The strange thing was, the closet would sometimes open on its own. Just a crack. My mom always brushed it off, saying it was because the house was old and the floor wasn't even. One night, when I was about 12, I woke up to the sound of whispers. At first, I thought it was my parents arguing downstairs, but as I listened closer, I realized the whispers were coming from inside the closet. Frozen with fear, I stared at the closet door. It was slightly ajar, as usual. The whispers were faint, almost like a conversation happening just out of earshot. I couldn't make out any words, but the tone was urgent, like whoever, or whatever, was speaking didn't want to be overheard. I mustered up the courage to turn on my bedside lamp. The light made the whispers stop instantly. The silence was deafening. I stared at the closet for what felt like hours before exhaustion took over, and I fell back asleep. The next morning, I told my mom about the whispers. She laughed it off, saying I must have been dreaming. But the whispers continued. Every few nights, I'd wake up to that same eerie murmuring. One night, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. Armed with a flashlight and shaking hands, I got out of bed and approached the closet. The whispers grew louder as I got closer. When I finally swung the door open, the whispers stopped. The closet was empty, just a few old clothes and boxes. But something caught my eye, deep scratches on the inside of the door, like someone had been clawing at it from the inside. I moved out of that room as soon as I could convince my parents. To this day, I don't know what was in that closet or what it wanted. But sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I swear I can still hear faint whispers. The Mirror in the Attic. A few years ago, I moved into an old Victorian house that had been converted into apartments. My unit was on the top floor, and I quickly discovered a small, dusty attic above it. Most of the space was empty, except for an antique mirror leaning against the wall. The mirror was massive, with a tarnished silver frame covered in intricate carvings. I didn't think much of it at first. It added a bit of charm to the otherwise boring attic, so I decided to leave it there. One night, I was lying in bed when I heard a soft thudding noise coming from the ceiling above me. It sounded like someone walking around in the attic. I froze. I lived alone, and I knew no one else had access to that space. Grabbing a flashlight, I climbed up the rickety ladder to check it out. The attic was cold and silent when I got there. I shone my flashlight around the room, but everything was just as I'd left it, except for the mirror. It was no longer leaning against the wall. Instead, it was propped up in the center of the room, tilted slightly forward, as if inviting me to look into it. My heart raced as I stepped closer. When I finally peered into the mirror, my reflection stared back at me, but something wasn't right. The figure in the mirror wasn't moving like I was. I raised my hand, the reflection didn't. I blinked, and my reflection didn't blink back. Instead, it smiled. I stumbled back, dropping the flashlight. When I picked it up, the mirror was back in its original spot against the wall, and my reflection was normal again. I wanted to believe I was imagining things, but every night after that, the thudding noises continued. Each time I went to check, the mirror had moved again. The final straw came a week later. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of faint laughter. It was coming from the attic. I didn't go up there. I didn't even pack my things. I left the apartment that night and never looked back. Sometimes, though, I have nightmares about that mirror. In the dreams, I'm standing in front of it, and the person on the other side is waiting to take my place.